Hello everybody and welcome back. It is good to talk to you all again on this glorious Friday. And today we are talking about premium tier 7 Japanese carrier, Kaga. Still work in progress ship, so here's the disclaimers. The ship is still work in progress. The stats and its performance and everything can and will be changed. This ship was provided by Wargaming for testing, and without much hesitation, let's get into the actual ship. But first things first, let's do a minor World of Warships story time. Once upon a time, many moons ago, Wargaming implemented carriers, and these carriers were really powerful. Of particular note were two ships, actually three, but two of them we remember most. One of them was called the Saipan. Not the Saipan that we have in game right now with its tier 9 aircraft and tiny squadrons. No, this was the Saipan back in the day at tier 6. When she had 2 torpedo bomber squadrons. That ship alone caused so much PTSD at the mid-tiers that she was eventually removed from the game, reworked, and dropped in her current form. The other ship is equally famous, the Skillway, aka the Midway with its 1-2-2 configuration. This was back in the early stages of the game when the first of us who got the Midway, well, with those 2 torpedo bomber squadrons we were walking around nuking tier 8 battleships off the face of the earth. So what does this have to do with the Kaga? Well, if you're looking at your screen right now, you might notice 2 torpedo bomber squadrons. Yeah, it's back, people. And guess what? This ship, in its current form, in the event that it stays in its current form, will bring about the revival of PTSD again for those sort of mid-ish tiers, because with 2 torpedo bomber squadrons, you can go around deleting things off the map, nuking things, and all sorts of other goodies. In this particular battle, at the very beginning, because with this much striking power, why not go and carrier snipe? Oh yeah, and that's another thing that's going to come back if Kaga stays in her current configuration. So let's talk about her planes a little bit. As she is a carrier, and the planes are the most important things. See, so what they did was they decided to give Kaga tier 6 aircraft. Tier 6 fighters, tier 6 torpedo bombers, tier 6 dive bombers. So in that way, not that great, especially the fighters. And with her fighters, she is going to lose most fighter engagements against Saipan, even will struggle against Ranger fighters. You know, again, tier 6 versus tier 7, not really the world's best fight. However, she has insane, absolutely insane striking power, which in a way kind of makes up for it, because if you sort of think back to the day where you had those strike midways and strike saipans, the idea was as long as you were able to get through 1 to 2 strikes and you were able to do damage, you're most likely to do more than somebody who's playing an air superiority configuration, which is exactly the case. If you run into an air superiority Saipan and you get off 2 good strikes, you've effectively done more damage now than that Saipan has with his bombers for that entire battle. If you run into, let's say, a 2-2-0 Saipan, then even though your fighters are going to suffer and they're going to lose most likely that fight, your ability to strike and do massive damage is going to overcome that sort of differential in performance between those 2 carriers. So in a way, yes, she is going to struggle fighter on fighter, but her strike potential at tier 7 is utterly unmatched, and you are going to be able to bomb the living hell out of other people, and you're going to give them brand new versions of carrier PTSD that they experienced back in those good old days. Now, going back to the carrier again, one other thing, of course, its hangar size is very large. 85 planes in total. Yes, they're tier 6 planes, I get it. But, you know, again, these torpedo squadrons are squadrons of 6. So if you strike even higher tier targets, tier 8, tier 9, what ends up happening is you lose 1 squadron on the way in completely, but you're still able to get off 1 squadron, and then of course on the way out you probably lose that squadron too, so you do suffer some losses. But with your huge hangar capacity, it's not as big of a deal. At the very start, including the 2 squadrons you start with, you have 43 torpedo bombers. 43. I mean, I've gone battles where I've run out of fighters, run out of dive bombers, and I look at my torpedo bombers, and I still have a good, healthy reserve of those said torpedo bombers. So with the Kaga, it's insane how much striking power you have in the short term, and also how much you can, you know, put out over the course of the battle. You just have so many of these aircraft in reserve. Now, again, I did mention that if you run into equal tier battles or even low tier, it's an absolute curb stomp. You don't even have to worry. You're just gonna curb stomp the living hell out of everybody. The torpedo bombers on the Kaga, they do have a somewhat unique drop pattern, so pay attention here to the strike that's happening on the Ranger. So what it is you have 3 wide torpedoes in the front and 3 concentrated torpedoes that get dropped behind. It's a bit of an odd pattern, but you can actually compensate for this pattern by dropping a little bit further back and having that IJN convergence happen a little bit to get your torpedoes to go in a little bit more focused, right? So yeah, you see it's a bit of an odd pattern there. Doesn't really stop me from absolutely devastating strike that Ranger and the Ryujo before that. Like once you know how to use the pattern, it won't matter. The pattern in itself is actually not a disadvantage because it has a tendency of screwing up people who are trying to avoid your torpedoes because, you know, normally you just have one wave. Well, here you've essentially got 2 waves to deal with and actually complicates trying to dodge it a little bit. So not necessarily a bad thing. One other thing that's unique about Kaga's torpedoes is its incredibly high speed when you get around to actually having torpedo acceleration. You have torpedoes that go 53 knots, which is very, very little reaction time. So what you can actually do is you can actually drop a little bit further away from your target. And by dropping a little bit further away from your target, first of all, you take less AA. So that's why you can actually sometimes deal with those like higher tier ships. You can stay out of their close range AA bubble, so only having to do with their mid and long range bubbles. So you get in there, you drop those torpedoes, and you let the fast speed and everything do your work for you. Kind of the torpedoes will, like, you know, kind of converge in and, you know, hit stuff. And just insane amounts of damage possible. The dive bombers, they're also kind of special. You don't have many of them. You have 2 squadrons of 6, I think, maybe with a little bit of reserves in the back. And they're unique because their manual drop dot is literally a dot. It is very, very, very small circle. And if you don't get panicked by defensive fire, you can land almost all of your bombs into that tiny little circle, which is great. Especially if you hit like superstructure or whatever, you can very easily do 2 fires like right off the bat. And I think that happens a little bit later on. I'll show you. Okay, so that's the aircraft. Oh, I did mention tier 6 fighters, right? Not very good. Those fighters are not great. Mostly you're going to use them for maybe a little bit of scouting. You're going to use them for more of a distraction, trying to engage bombers and stuff like that. And so yeah, you do have to be careful. Your fighters are not the world's best fighters. In terms of the carrier itself, Kaga's 51,000 HP, which is a very, very high amount of HP for a carrier, which means that, you know, if you get into, let's say, you know, you get into a battle with other carriers that is not called the Kaga, you can snipe them quite effectively, but they don't have that big of a capability to snipe you back. Of course, if you run into other Kagas, be careful, because then you can talk about sniping, yeah, and that's not fun. Of course, in this battle, what I did is I sniped both their carriers at the start of the battle, and then, of course, went to town on the rest of their team. Which is, you know, what a carrier used to be able to do. So, yay, we're kind of going back to the good old days with this ship, right? Not so good for the enemy surface combatants. They're not too happy with this particular thing. Okay, so let's talk about other things about the carrier. She has quite a few secondaries, and she's got like 200mm secondaries as well. They fire AP. She's got like some 127mm secondaries. But then again, if you're dealing with secondaries on a carrier, like, yeah, there's something iffy there. So again, see the drop? Like, I'm dropping a little bit further back, and the torpedoes, I'm just giving them the opportunity to get a little bit closer together so the spread becomes a little bit more lethal. Okay, so I want you to take your attention right now and focus it onto that dive bomber squadron. Currently I have a squadron of 5, down from 7 max. 1 got shot down, so I'm down to 4. What you're looking for is that dive bombing accuracy that I'm talking about. There's 3 planes now. Yikes, that wasn't good. And I'll be losing maybe a few more planes, but watch that small dot. Watch. Wait, no, there it is. Look at that. That's a tiny little dot. There we go. I bring the manual drop on and lose another aircraft there. 2 bomb hits, 2 fires. Because they're so accurate. They'll land exactly basically where you put them. And that Gneisenau is actually going to burn to death. So, currently in the game so far, bunch of torpedo hits, couple of fires, bunch of floodings, 2 ships sunk so far, 128k damage and climbing. Okay, so while my planes are rearming again, at least the torpedo bombers are rearming again because I have no more dive bombers. See, you do run out of dive bombers way before you run out of torpedo bombers. Okay, so going back to an earlier point, I think, and I don't think I talked about the AA yet. So if you're going to get sniped in a Kaga, you're really going to need your fighters. Your AA is not good, like at all. You got some 127mm mounts and some 25mm mounts, but I would not be counting all my AA in the Kaga. The Naizenel that I set on fire, he died. So, my most immediate concern right now, of course, is this Mutsuki. He's coming up the middle. A little bit of a challenging place to maybe drop torpedoes on him, but I'm trying to go maybe force him into a little bit more of an uncomfortable position, then drop on him and see what happens. And hopefully I can kill him off. Yeah. Little DD's coming up. It's dangerous. Of course, as you'll notice in my current position, I'm actually trying to get out of this little spot, and a little bit hard to do. Kaga is not the most maneuverable ship. She's okay, like she's very standard typical carrier, but like not the best. Like obviously nothing compared to like Saipan. Anyway, see, like I was dropping on that destroyer while he was able to minimum arm distance the front drop. The rear one is like, surprise, I'm here, and yeah, was able to bag myself a destroyer with only one squadron, leaving me this other squadron to go ahead and bomb this Cleveland. So going back to her sort of maneuverability stats, 28 knots max speed, not the world's highest speed for tier 7 carriers, but it's okay. I mean, as a carrier, generally speaking, you're in a little bit further back of a position. 28 knots is still okay. It's reasonably fast. Of course, you know, you can, of course, get chased down by DDs and stuff like that if they get around you. But with your high strike capability, it's not that big of a problem. Right now, of course, you know, Wargaming, if they decide to nerf the squadrons, change them up or whatever, maybe it'll have more of an impact that way. Turning radius, 1,080 meters, is pretty standard carrier turn radius, like nice and big circle there. Rudder shift is like 14.4 seconds stock, which is okay. If you throw on a rudder shift module, you'll get it down to a number that's reasonably comfortable. And finally, just talking about the last thing with regards to the ship stats, it's got a surface detectability value that's actually lower than its air detect value. So you're actually more likely to be spotted by aircraft on a more consistent basis than being surface spotted. Surface spotting, not so bad. If you run Concealment Expert, it's actually quite low. It's like 10 point something, while air concealment will be like 11 point something with your Concealment Expert skill. So you do have to be a little bit wary of aircraft. Okay, so that's, I think, pretty much everything with regards to aircraft. Oh, by the way, I did forget to mention, there is another flight control module right now. It's the 113, where you have 3 dive bombers. And honest to God, if I see you using that over the torpedo bomber squadron, I'm gonna come and I'm gonna find you. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. It's just like, why would you use dive bombers over torpedo bombers? I mean, torpedo bombers are so much more consistent damage, and you know, torpedo bombers are way easier to get consistent damage out of than dive bombers. Dive bombers, even with these like pinpoint little dots, you still have, you know, like potential issues if you run to, like, let's say defensive fire or whatnot, where your bombs might not hit anything at all. Where with torpedo bombers, you can actually hit torpedoes while under defensive fire. And speaking of defensive fire and these torpedo bomber squadrons, it actually has a very cool effect on these particular planes. Where with normally, yeah, it'll just fan it out a little bit more. This one causes an effect where, like, the first 3, they fan out a huge amount, and you can actually use the edge of one of them to actually like drop torpedoes in like crazy angles where normally people would be able to get away if they were there. That with Kaga's crazy spread, torpedoes will actually go in those crazy directions and hit them. It's kind of neat, and yeah, it's one of those cool things about this very weird drop pattern. And that's pretty much all I have to say about the ship so far. In her current state, in my personal experience with a ship like this, yes, I would like to have the ship very much, please, and thank you, so I can return to giving the enemy team serious cases of PTSD. Hey, maybe Wargaming can make some money through counseling those players. Yeah, maybe that's what they should do. They should set up a counseling service and charge players doubloons to seek counseling from. Okay, no, I'm just messing around now. Just crazy damage output. Okay, so you're probably asking also one other thing, I guess. How does she do against higher tier stuff? Tier 7, I didn't have an issue. Tier 8, didn't have an issue. And mostly because, you know, when you're dealing with, let's say, up to tier 8 ships and stuff like that, I mean, as a hero, you're basically using the same planes up against those ships, right? The same threat applies, the same ships to avoid applies. avoid North Carolinas, that's like self-explanatory. Avoid Kutuzovs, that's self-explanatory. Go after ships that are easier to go after. Of course, running to tier 9s, again, you've done that in the Hiryu. If you play the Hiryu before, you've run into tier 9s, and you know how to avoid the ships to avoid, and go after ships that you can go after. And that's the exact same thing for Kaga. So as long as you play it intelligently, you should be just fine. Take out targets that you can take out. I mean, with this amount of striking power, like, you should be stomping certain ships into the ground. Like destroyers, easy targets. Cruisers, if not A spec, easy targets. Lone battleships, really easy targets. Battleships with weak KA, really easy targets. I mean, that's kind of what you're doing with this carrier all the time. Okay, so what else? Other things to talk about. I don't even really know. I mean, I'm currently sitting at 195,000 damage. See, this battle I played when I was a little bit more awake. Yesterday when I played it, my max damage was like 171,000, I think. And at the time I was like, yeah, I'm tired. I'm really, really tired. And I'm like, when I'm awake, I'll break 200k. So, woke up this morning, first thing I did was go ahead and play battles when I was awake. And yeah, within my like second battle, easily was going to break 200k. So 195,000 and deleting this New York. I could have actually done this with one torpedo bomber squadron. Didn't even need the second one here. You'll see. There's the drop from the first one. I set up the second one just in case something happened, but yeah, I accidentally locked it in and there we go. Boop, 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 dead. So that second squadron was a waste. I could have actually gone even higher. I think I probably would have broken 250,000 damage if I actually saved that other squadron that I didn't drop there on that New York as a waste. If I just turned that around, dropped it on the Nagato, I would have broken 250k damage in this game. But unfortunately, I just split second too early of a lock-in and I couldn't disengage that squadron, so ended up losing some damage potential there. So currently over 210k damage, almost 220. And just more damage to be farmed. So sit tight, and I'm just gonna go farm me some more damages. Okay, what else? Not much more to say. Oh, I did completely forget to talk about the armor. So the Kaga, in terms of like her flight deck and her superstructure area and like the hangar area, whatever, her armor is just not very good. Oh, and that's the other thing I forgot to mention, right? The protection. That's, yeah, okay. Quickly talk about that while I'm trying to navigate my way out of this very narrow pathway, which I have no success with because I was a potato. Anyways, okay. She has a reasonably thick belt. Like, she actually has some significant belt armor, which means that if it's like a cruiser or whatnot, and they're trying to shoot AP to get those citadels, not that easy to do. Plus, I think her actual citadel is buried underwater. So, not an easy ship to citadel, although she will take penetration damage, and quite a lot of that. But again, her HP pool definitely helps. She has a very, very large HP pool. One other thing I forgot to talk about. Kaga has really solid torpedo protection for a tier 7 carrier. I think it's like, with the damage control party 1, it's like 24%, which is quite substantial because if you're taking, let's say, torpedo hits from, let's say, other carriers that might try to snipe you, you might actually come out of that relatively more unscathed compared to if you went and bombed them when, them with their very, very poor or non-existent torpedo protection in the case of, for example, the Ranger. So with Kaga, you do actually have a reasonable level of protection. I guess this, it does have to be based on the fact that this was built out of a battleship hull. So, she is going to have a reasonable amount of sort of like the close to water protection, which is good. It can benefit you at times. There we go. Bayern came out, got him into a very awkward position. So I'm going to go drop on him and I'm just going to end him off right now. And as you can tell, we are already running out of time once this Bayern dies right there. That would be my 7th kill in the game. We're out of time. Nagato is now officially coming in to shoot at me, but a little bit too late, not enough time. And like I said, had I had that other squadron, I could drop on the Nagato, would have broken 250,000 damage. And, seeing high damage numbers with Kaga is not rare. I mean, I had one bad battle, I think, where I didn't do as well, but I was against an air superiority Saipan. I was in that game, I had like maybe 60k damage. Wasn't very good, but in a lot of the other battles, like breaking 100k is no sweat at all. And final results screen, there we go. First of all, base experience, 2,326, easily highest on the team. 36 torpedo hits, 238,000 damage. 7 ships destroyed, 13 flooding, 654,000 credits, 5,200 experience earned. Taking a look at detailed reports, there we go. If you take a look at just torpedo damage, 205,000. And of course, let's take a look at credits earned and EXP as well. Take away all the deductions, almost 600,000 credits earned. Anyways, folks, hope you enjoyed this Kaga preview. Take care, have a good one, and I'll talk to all of you again soon.